The name Lucifer is one of the most infamous in human history, often associated with ultimate evil, rebellion against God, and the eternal torment of hell. For centuries, he has been portrayed as the fallen angel who defied his creator, leading a celestial uprising and being cast down from heaven to become Satan, the ruler of darkness. His story has been immortalized in religious texts, literature, art, and culture, shaping the very concept of evil in the minds of millions. But was Lucifer truly the villain he is made out to be? Or has his identity been misunderstood, misrepresented, and reshaped over time? The deeper one dives into the origins of Lucifer's story, the more one begins to see that the truth is far more complex than the traditional narrative suggests. One of the biggest misconceptions about Lucifer is that his name is synonymous with Satan. In modern Christian theology, this idea is widely accepted, but the actual biblical basis for it is surprisingly thin. The name Lucifer appears only once in most translations of the Bible, specifically in Isaiah 14 verse 12, which states, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning?" However, when examined closely, this passage is not actually about an angelic rebellion at all. The original Hebrew text does not use the word Lucifer, but rather Helel ben Shakar, which translates to Shining One, Son of the Dawn. This passage is part of a prophecy against the king of Babylon, a human ruler whose arrogance and downfall were being compared to the fall of a bright star. The term Lucifer only entered the conversation because of a translation choice made in the Latin Vulgate Bible, where Helel was rendered as Lucifer, meaning light-bringer or morning star. This translation was not originally meant to refer to Satan, but to a fallen earthly king. Over time, however, the name Lucifer became mistakenly associated with the devil, leading to centuries of theological and cultural misunderstanding. If Lucifer was not originally intended to be a reference to Satan, then where does the idea of Satan as a fallen angel come from? Much of this belief is actually drawn from passages that never explicitly mention Lucifer by name. One of the most frequently cited is Ezekiel 28, which describes the fall of the king of Tyre in language that many have interpreted as referring to an angelic being. This passage speaks of a figure who was the seal of perfection, who was in Eden, the garden of God, and who was anointed as a guardian cherub before being cast down due to pride and corruption. This has led many to connect the dots, assuming that this was a description of Satan's original fall from heaven. However, others argue that this passage, like Isaiah 14, was primarily directed at a human ruler, using grand, poetic language to describe his downfall. If this is the case, then the biblical evidence for Lucifer as a rebellious angel is far less clear than many assume. So if the Bible does not explicitly depict Lucifer as Satan, where does this idea come from? Much of it can be traced to later Christian writings and traditions, particularly those that emerged in the early centuries of the Church. By the time of early Christian theologians such as Origen and Saint Jerome, the idea of Satan as a fallen angel had begun to take shape. Later, during the Middle Ages, this concept was fully developed through works like John Milton's Paradise Lost, which dramatically portrayed Lucifer as a once glorious archangel who defied God and was cast into the depths of hell. This poetic and tragic depiction of Lucifer was so powerful that it cemented his identity in the minds of many, even though it was more of a literary invention than a strictly biblical doctrine. The image of Lucifer as a proud, ambitious, and ultimately doomed figure became deeply ingrained in Western culture, shaping how people perceive the nature of good and evil. But what if Lucifer's story is not one of pure villainy, but of misunderstanding? In Paradise Lost, Milton presents Lucifer as a complex figure, one who seeks freedom, refuses to be ruled, and famously declares, "Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven." This raises an intriguing question. Was Lucifer's rebellion truly an act of evil, or was it an act of self-determination? If one views the story from Lucifer's perspective, he is not merely a villain but a being who refuses to submit, who desires autonomy, and who challenges authority. This interpretation has led some to see Lucifer not as a symbol of wickedness, but as a representation of resistance against tyranny. In this view, his fall is not just about punishment, but about the consequences of challenging absolute power. Some have even suggested that Lucifer's role in the grand scheme of existence is more complicated than simply being an enemy of God. In certain theological traditions, Satan is not an independent force of evil, but rather a servant of God, fulfilling a necessary function. In the book of Job, Satan appears not as a rogue demon, but as a member of God's heavenly court, acting as an accuser or prosecutor who tests human faith. If this is the case, then the role of Lucifer, or Satan, may not be one of rebellion but of refining and challenging humanity, playing an essential part in the divine order. Some interpretations go even further, suggesting that Lucifer's fall was part of a larger divine plan, that he serves as a catalyst for human free will, giving people the choice between good and evil rather than forcing them into obedience. There is also the idea that Lucifer represents something more symbolic, a reflection of the struggle within every human being. The battle between light and darkness, pride and humility, obedience and rebellion, exists not just in the heavens but in the heart of every person. The story of Lucifer can be seen as an allegory for the dangers of ambition and pride, but also as a reminder that the line between hero and villain is often blurred. Even in human history, many figures once labeled as rebels or traitors were later seen as visionaries and revolutionaries. If Lucifer's story is viewed through this lens, then his role becomes more than that of a one-dimensional villain. He becomes a figure of tragic complexity, embodying both the dangers of unchecked pride and the desire for self-rule. The enigma of Lucifer's identity extends beyond theology and into the very fabric of human philosophy, psychology, and the nature of morality itself. His story forces us to question not only the origins of evil, but also the framework by which we define good and bad. Is evil merely the absence of good, or does it serve a necessary function within creation? If Lucifer truly was an angel who fell from grace, was his fall an act of defiance, or was it an inevitable step in the cosmic order? If he was instead a symbol misunderstood through time, then what does his legend tell us about human fears, desires, and the need for an ultimate antagonist? These are the deeper questions that lie beneath the surface of his story, questions that remain relevant in philosophy, literature, and even psychology today. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Lucifer mythos is how he is often portrayed as a bringer of knowledge. In some traditions, particularly in esoteric and Gnostic thought, Lucifer is not simply a rebel but a liberator, one who brings enlightenment to humanity rather than seeking its destruction. This idea has parallels to the story of Prometheus from Greek mythology, the titan who stole fire from the gods and gave it to mankind, suffering eternal punishment for his act of defiance. Just as Prometheus is sometimes seen as a tragic hero who defied the tyranny of Zeus to empower humanity, some alternative interpretations of Lucifer cast him as a figure who sought to bring wisdom to mankind, an action that led to his condemnation. In this view, his fall is not a punishment for wickedness, but for challenging authority, for daring to give humanity the ability to think, question, and seek truth beyond divine control. This interpretation is particularly compelling when considering the story of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, often associated with Satan. In Genesis, the serpent tempts Eve with the fruit of the tree of knowledge, telling her that eating it will open her eyes and make her like God, knowing good and evil. This moment is traditionally viewed as the origin of human sin, yet it can also be seen as the birth of human consciousness, the point at which humanity moves from a state of innocent obedience to one of self-awareness and moral agency. If one aligns the serpent with Lucifer, then his role shifts from that of a deceiver to that of an awakener, one who offers knowledge at a great cost. This perspective challenges traditional theological interpretations, suggesting that Lucifer's story is not just about rebellion, but about the price of free will and the pursuit of wisdom. Another dimension to Lucifer's identity is how he has been portrayed across different cultures and religions. The concept of a fallen or rebellious divine being is not unique to Christianity. In Islamic tradition, Iblis, often equated with Satan, is a being of fire who refuses to bow to Adam, seeing himself as superior to humanity. In Hindu mythology, there are Asuras, powerful divine beings who challenge the gods and often embody pride and ambition. Even in ancient Mesopotamian religions, figures like Enki were associated with defying higher gods to grant wisdom to humanity. The recurrence of such figures across different cultures suggests a deeper archetypal story, one that speaks to the universal human struggle between submission and independence, obedience and curiosity, servitude and self-determination. Beyond religious and mythological traditions, Lucifer's character has been explored extensively in literature, where he is often depicted as more than just a one-dimensional force of evil. From Paradise Lost to the Sandman comics, from Goethe's Faust to modern television adaptations, Lucifer is frequently portrayed as charismatic, intelligent, and even sympathetic. In these portrayals, he is not simply a destroyer but a questioner, one who challenges the established order and forces both gods and humans to confront uncomfortable truths. He embodies the idea that villains are not always purely evil, but rather reflections of complex motivations, unrestrained ambition, and the consequences of seeking power or knowledge at any cost. This more nuanced depiction raises important questions about how society views rebellion and authority. Are those who defy the system inherently evil, or does history simply cast them as villains when they stand against power? This leads to a deeper exploration of how morality itself is structured. Many religious traditions operate on a dualistic framework, where good and evil are clearly defined opposites. But reality is rarely so black and white. If Lucifer's fall was due to pride, then was his sin the desire for power, or simply the refusal to be subordinate? If he was cast out because of his ambition, then does that make ambition inherently evil? These questions challenge the rigid moral frameworks that have long defined religious and philosophical thought. In reality, many of the qualities attributed to Lucifer, intelligence, independence, determination, are traits that, in other contexts, are admired and even considered virtuous. The very qualities that make him a villain in traditional theology are often the same ones that make heroes in other stories. This contradiction forces us to ask, is Lucifer truly evil, or is he simply the antagonist of a specific narrative? One of the most profound implications of Lucifer's story is how it relates to human nature itself. Many have argued that his fall from heaven mirrors the struggles of humanity, the internal war between desire and duty, pride and humility, independence and submission. Every person faces moments of temptation, moments of rebellion, moments of questioning the rules set before them. In this sense, Lucifer's story is not just a cosmic drama, but a deeply personal one, reflecting the challenges that every individual must navigate. His tale resonates because it is, at its core, a story of choice, of deciding whether to accept the path laid out by authority or to carve out one's own, regardless of the cost. Lucifer's identity, then, is not just a matter of theological debate, but a reflection of the broader human experience. Whether he is seen as the ultimate villain, a tragic figure, a misunderstood liberator, or even a necessary force within the universe, his story continues to captivate because it speaks to something fundamental within us all. It is a story of defiance, consequence, and the pursuit of something greater, even if that pursuit leads to ruin. The fact that his name still provokes discussion, fascination, and fear after thousands of years is a testament to the power of his legend. Perhaps the greatest mystery of all is not whether Lucifer is truly the villain, but why his story continues to echo in the human imagination, generation after generation.